Welcome to our Natural Habitat Adventures webinar today, a truly distinctive Namibia safari, presented by Brad Josephs. Brad has been a career naturalist guide with Natural Habitat Adventures since 2004. He has a degree in wildlife biology from University of Alaska, Fairbanks. And Brad designs and guides trips all over the world, including Alaska, Borneo, China, Africa, and snow leopard expeditions in India. His main mission throughout his career has been to promote wildlife conservation through responsible ecotourism. And Brad, we're just so excited that you could be here with us today. Welcome.
Wow, thank you so much. That was a great intro. Appreciate that very much. Hi guys. Yeah, this is a good time to hang out at home and get distracted by something beautiful like Namibia. Um, I got an email from we all got an email from Ben Bressler, the founder of NatHab, the other day. Who said he was stressed out about stuff, because the travel industry for sure is one of the fastest and going to be the hardest hit things in situations like this. But we've survived lots of problems like this, and what his main point is that he just went out and took a walk in nature, and it made him feel so much better, and he was able to kind of refocus and take care of the business that needs to get taken care of. So I think that's just really important for us to remember. And I also think that, situations like this, what they do is they kind of remind us that Mother Nature is actually in total control. We're not in control. So when you're dealing with an entity that's so much in control, that entity needs to be respected. So this is going to be a good reminder for us to respect nature, when it comes to climate change and all these kind of things, because Mother Nature is the one that's in control. So, but yeah, so that's why. So NatHab is just changed its mission statement a couple months ago to you can read it there. It's focusing on it's not focusing for the forefront on travel. It's actually focusing on conservation, and then using travel as a tool for conservation. So I think I had a great opportunity to help co-lead a photography trip this fall in Namibia. And what I kind of found was that all of these, the conservation in the places that we went in Namibia really was possibly the best example I've ever seen in all the places that I go, of where this ecotourism is directly supporting the conservation. So I'm going to talk you through the trip, show you some beautiful scenes, and tell you a couple stories. And then also, I think, going back to what I was talking about with let's focus on respecting nature in the future. Why not highlight some of the incredible conservation heroes and success stories in a country that really doesn't get thought about nearly as much as places like Kenya and Botswana and Galapagos. It's still one of those places that is rarely visited and not many people know about. But I'll tell you what, it's one of my favorite places in the world. I actually traveled through Namibia over 20 years ago by myself. Wasn't quite like a NatHab trip. It was $10 a day with a tent on my back, and rented some vehicles and just explored. And I know, just always been just enthralled and kind of just with this country. And because I love all ecosystems, but deserts for sure, I love those. And this is one of the most incredibly intense desert landscapes on the planet. And kind of the reason why is, you see Namibia's down here in the corner. So what's happening is you get this kind of hot, wet air, and it hits Madagascar and hits Mozambique during the rainy season. But then as it passes kind of this region here, I hope you see my mouse. It passes over this like high altitude, I think it's called like the Drakensberg Mountains, and gets over into this high altitude plateau. It's like Botswana and most of Namibia and South Africa actually are pretty high altitude. They're 4,000 or 5,000 feet. Some of the highest altitudes get up to 10. So what that does is it wrings the moisture out. So as that air is moving across over into Namibia, I mean, there's just no moisture left. It's just like hot, dry wind coming across. And but then you have this strange phenomena called the Benguela current, which is an upwelling in cold Antarctic waters, and it hits that, and so you just get this really unique landscape in place. And I mean, I'll be honest, it's not an easy place for anybody to live, any creature, any plant, any bug. So that's why it's so fascinating, because there are super tough organisms and people and animals that that live here, and that's what's so neat about it. And plus the scenery is fantastic. So here's Namibia, and we basically start our trip in Windhoek, and then we travel to 3 separate spots on this itinerary by small planes. So everywhere we go, because the distances are vast. So instead of driving for 20 hours, we fly for an hour. And then we get this kind of amazing perspective of what is one of the most sparsely populated countries in the world. I mean, you fly over Namibia, and you look down and there's basically nothing. It is one of the most untouched places so far that I've ever seen. And yeah, there's just so much to talk about. But one of the things about Namibia that's important to understand is that, Namibia is a new country. I mean, it was only in 1990 that it became independent. So it's growing into its independence still. And there's so much potential in this country for how the future is going to go. And basically before 90, you had this tremendous civil war. Well, not a civil war, it was a war for independence. But they came, they were independent now, and so few people, and just this amazing landscape, amazing wildlife. So how are we going to conserve it in the future? Like, how are they going to conserve their own resources in the future? You have tremendous pressure from China. Everybody knows me, knows I love China, but they are, very, very influential, and looking at Namibia as a resource extraction. There's a lot of pressures from poaching. So really, as I understood Namibia more, and beginning to, it was a tremendous change between now and 20 years ago. Namibia is facing some pretty huge things, and although they're independent, now they're feeling that pressure of being colonized again by other countries. Uh-oh. Sorry. Yeah, so really, actually what I saw was ecotourism is a tremendously influential force in how Namibia is going to decide it's going to allocate its resources and conserve them in the future. So we first start down in the Sossusvlei region, the Namib-Naukluft National Park in the Namib Desert, and just fantastic scenery. And when you arrive there, it's just like you've landed on another planet, like the planet in Star Wars that's a desert, where Luke Skywalker's from. And that's what it feels like. You don't feel like you're on Earth anymore. That's an amazing feeling. I mean, it's and pretty much this was a photography trip. That was my job, was being the photography instructor on this trip. So we started out with just focusing on landscape photography, and the landscapes are so unique. It's called Sossusvlei, and this certain spot right here is called Deadvlei. And Vlei means marsh in Afrikaans, and they're basically dried up marshes that these sand dunes, basically, like the climate did change, it got drier there, and the sand from all the wind from the ocean and all these things, it basically just blocked the rivers off. So you have these sort of old marshes with hundreds and hundreds of years old, these camel thorn trees, which have turned black in the sun. So for landscape photography, for just, I mean, look at the colors of the sky. And no, I actually did not, I like undersaturated. I mean, it's just stunningly saturated with color here. The blue sky, different, and you'll notice the red sand dunes are so gorgeous. It's there's iron in the sand, so you just have these, some like the highest sand dunes in the world. And even though, like when we landed here, I asked the driver immediately, like, so it seems pretty dry here. When's the last time it rained? He's like, oh, we haven't really had a good rain since 2012. So we're talking about just scant showers and then some fog that comes in from the ocean. That's the only moisture. Like, it basically is a place devoid of water. So you wouldn't expect anything to be living, but because there are underground river sources, you do get some vegetation, although it's sparse. And there are some of the toughest animals in the world, especially, you know, arid adapted animals, such as these gorgeous oryx, which are the national animal of Namibia and sort of symbolize the desert. And they're really cool. They're notoriously dangerous to predators, like lions and things. I have to rely on them for food, but I mean, oryx, because of their dagger-like horns and their powerful muscles, they're just really deadly at defending themselves. So it's a respectable animal. But you'll notice that these guys actually these are pregnant females and they're skinny. So Namibia, and it depends who you talk to, but there's a high chance that they just had a relief from a drought that was 6 or 7 years, like this most severe drought ever, in a place that doesn't get in. I mean, it's just basically like the worst drought ever in history there. So yeah, and there's a lot of thought that is intensified through climate change. That the air is getting hotter, and it's hotter, drier air, and you're just getting less effect from sort of seasonal rains. So it's a big problem. And these animals are really at the breaking point of being able to survive this drought, through the little bit of vegetation that's fed by these underground rivers, a little bit of moisture that their deep roots get down in there, and some fog that comes in from the ocean. But anyway, but the good news is that it was actually really sad times there. It was just like at the breaking point of these ecosystems. But when I left, we began to get our first rains, and it was actually after, you know, the last few months, it's been from what I've heard, a good relief. So that's good news. But you can see how skinny these oryx are. They basically don't need to drink, and there are water holes that are put through, like man-made water holes that can keep these animals alive. But it's just the vegetation. It's just not there. I mean, there's trees there that most of them, they don't put leaves out until it rains. And if they have to wait a few years, they do.
Hey, Brad,
But back to the landscapes. Yes.
can you take your
Hello?
mouse and, hey, Brad, can you take your mouse and move it to the bottom corner? Because yeah, there you go. It's just over the top of
Oh,
the picture. Yeah.
oh, I didn't, wasn't. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
These stunning sand dunes that are sculpted by the wind and in the red color. So what we do is go out in the early morning and then in the late afternoon and be able to, like, just for landscape photography. I mean, what you do is you concentrate on the composition, these shapes and the lines, leading lines, things like that out of the sand dunes. So just, you know, fantastically beautiful desert country. And that's really the highlight of this Sossusvlei region. And then I guess one of the highlights of the whole trip was, and if you guys are signing up for this trip in the future, there's an optional hot air balloon at sunrise over the desert. I mean, you have to do it. It's unbelievable to go up a couple thousand feet and watch the sunrise over the desert and get that kind of perspective. I mean, it was a amazing experience. You're just floating up there. So that's really a great way to appreciate the vastness of this, Mars-like or lunar landscape. Yeah, it was amazing. You land and have breakfast, Nat style in the desert, gourmet breakfast made for you. And being able to see some of these iconic desert animals and some of the most dramatic desert landscapes in the world. And even some of the small stuff, like this, there's a beetle here. You notice this beetle has got bumps on its back. Well, that's used to catch the fog. Whenever it's foggy in the morning, it's just more surface area for the condensation to happen in the fog, and then they'll stand on their kind of like their front legs and then let the water flow into their mouth. So just incredible stuff here. Just a couple shots of like where you'd be staying. Super luxurious, but also feeling like you're also in the wilderness of um, these these camps that we stay at. It's just super cool. So yeah, you can tell it's a nice place. Um, and then after that, we fly up north to, which was into the Kunin region, to basically, it's right on the Skeleton Coast. So I'll talk more about Skeleton Coast in a few minutes, but again, just super rugged, incredibly dry places where there's oases of these underground rivers, which support some amazing wildlife. To see a desert giraffe like this, it's incredible. It's just very unique compared to the normal, the very typical African savanna landscape where people go look at the animals. But there are animals here. The wildlife's phenomenal. And then you see these oryxes. They're because of this habitat's actually better, more well fed by underground rivers, and so like this is a big male, just a total stud of an oryx there. So now we're going to get into a little bit about some of these conservation success stories that was going to be one of the focuses of this webinar. Is there's very few left, but there are these desert adapted lions. I mean, they're an African lion. They're the same, but they've adapted themselves to live in this dry environment. There's times where these lions have been followed and they don't basically have never been recorded actually drinking water for weeks and weeks on end. They get all of their moisture out of their prey. So they eat an oryx and it's gotten moisture out of some leaves that it's digested, and then they can actually survive like that with basically no water. So you got to really admire these lions. They're just fantastic. And if you like lions, big cats, and photographing them, and you just look at the backdrops, it's just so unique. We're not in the Serengeti. Like this is a totally different kind of place. And these lions are amazing. Beautiful, and the desert lions have a very blonde mane, which makes them stunning. And this was actually the first lions that we found was eating an oryx. So it's just being able to watch these lions on a kill. You can just barely see there's a collar on these guys. So this is a pride of lions that has gotten a lot of notoriety in the past. And there's before I continue on with the lions, there's Abner Simeon, who I co-guided this trip with. Fantastic guy, and that was just where, you see he's young, the Namibian generation, just the best opportunities for them to work is through this ecotourism. Because to be honest, there's like mining and things going on. I mean, South Africa has diamond mines that they own, but they basically that money doesn't get spread into the local economy. China's got big mines there, but that's Chinese crew, Chinese contracts. The money goes to China. That's it. The Namibians get nothing. That's a real fact of this country. So to be able to see this excellent, I mean, when you go down there and you're employing these guys to have this love of their nature and their wildlife and put a value on it and employ these guys this way, that's a conservation success story right there. I mean, that's really the focus of why I want to sit here and talk people into going to Namibia in the future and keep these guys working. Their knowledge and their love and their passion of their country and the animals is, something that you really I'll never forget. So it's great stuff. Again, here's conservation hero, Dr. Philip Stander. So he's been obsessed in studying these lions for 35 years. And he's up there with George Schaller and some of these guys that I would say, in my opinion, are the most dedicated conservationists in the world. like 35 years driving around in this desert. Basically, no relationships, no nothing. Just all he does is try. He collars these lions and tries to save these lions, small private lions. And the lions are so in trouble because they will go over into a village that is outside of the national park or the private concession area, and they're really really easy to poach, because they go after livestock. And what do the villagers do is they just put poison on it and let the lions take care of themselves. And there's been lots of lions lost. I mean, this is a dying breed of these really special animals. And this guy, if it weren't for this guy, there would be no lions left. And I don't know, it's just he's unbelievable. There's a documentary that came out recently called Nat Geo called Vanishing Kings. And I mean, these lions are, so they feed on oryx and they migrate around, and then anyway, I'll show you a couple more examples. But these beautiful, beautiful lions, the desert lions of the Skeleton Coast. Next conservation story goes to the desert elephants. Again, it's just an African elephant, but it's desert adapted. This is an elephant where, I mean, well, they do drink at a few of the water holes that are maintained with a solar pump that have been dug by people. So that definitely helps them out. But this is another incredibly tough population that has truly, you just have to admire them. They don't have the resources that other elephants have, but they just get by. They get by, and they're just fantastic. There's just a couple. And what struck me the most about watching these amazing elephants was they basically, all they have to eat are acacia thorns. I mean, you see those thorns? Those would, if you grabbed onto that, it would cut you. They would impale your skin, and that's what they eat. They just crush up these acacia thorns. The other thing that's really interesting is that African elephants and other places, actually in all the elephants in Asia also, they have a habit, kind of a bad habit of destroying well, I guess it's part of the ecosystem, but destroying their food. I mean, they will just knock a tree down and eat it. Well, that tree's gone. These guys don't do that. It doesn't matter how hungry they are. It's like they know we only have a few trees, so we have to take care of them. And that was an endearing thing that I learned about these guys. These elephants have suffered tremendously because of the war. That war that was like 1960 to 1980, early 80s. You can see the drop in numbers. They were just poached. I mean, when you're in a war, the soldiers, the South African army actually would just shoot them when they had nothing else to do, just to take their trophies, their tusks back as trophies. So there was basically just unlimited hunting. Like nobody cared until the war stopped, and Namibia got independent, and now you see the populations leveled off. And but you've got some problems here that have happened recently. You've got a big increase in the poaching for ivory, continued habitat loss. So this Ramey Brown that you see right there, those guys are some of the most incredible conservation heroes. They're two wildlife biologists that do consulting in the half the year, and then they take half of the year. They're actually live in Netherland, Colorado, just up from Boulder. And they just follow and document these elephants, and they get all the information. They know exactly all the elephants, where they go, and if the elephants wander out of the area, where they also get in tremendous conflicts. I mean, an elephant can go into a village and do some real damage, and the villagers will kill it and eat it, or poaching. So these guys are just out there alone in a vehicle in one of the most hostile landscapes in the world, and very undeveloped, very just desolate, dry, and dangerously hot. And yeah, they follow these elephants around, and they will go in and kind of be in the middle to keep them from getting killed with the villagers, and just sharing this information with the government, helping to support the tourism, and yeah, they're just the saviors of these elephants. And I just can't tell you how much respect I have for them. And yeah, the Desert Elephant Conservation Project. So Dr. Brown and Ramey, the husband and wife. And I just never seen people love animals as much as these guys love those elephants. So it's incredible. And their base camp is the lodge that we stay at. So that whole project, is in a lot of ways supported by um, NatHab and their partner down there, Wilderness Safaris, who supports them, gives them a place to live and helps them. And then of course they have to rely a lot on private donations. And then they give us a talk while we're at the lodge and explain their project, which was just truly amazing. I mean, you think about Jane Goodall and Diane Fossey, and these are those guys for the elephants. There's the research camp. So when you go to these lodges and you stay there, you're funding this whole project. I mean, so what these places are private concessions. They're like game reserves. So somebody can buy the land, but instead of converting it to agriculture and trying to have goats and sheep, which happens a lot in Namibia, and then they're going to kill all the predators that are there, and those goats and sheep will take all the browse away from the wildlife. Instead, you can set it aside as like a private national park, and that's a huge theme in Africa. And in my opinion, it's great because it's a model that can be applied to other places in the world. For taking private land, and the value of it actually is the animals because tourists go to see it. So, and there's one question that I had. I mean, does the wildlife tourism affect the animals? I mean, of course there'd be some effect, but the benefits super, super hugely outweigh. And whenever you're driving around in Africa, like the animals, they see your vehicles, they don't care. And they just know. You can drive up to any of the animals and they don't care. So, yeah, of course there'd be some impact, I guess, but nothing that I saw. Just giant benefits of people coming down to appreciate these magnificent animals, put a value on it, put the locals to work at the lodges as guides, cooks, all the other, managers, all this stuff, so that the whole local community becomes involved in the conservation. It's not just an NGO that says we want to preserve these elephants because they should be. It's the whole community saying, yeah, we want these elephants around. Yeah, pretty awesome stuff. It's just, really, really direct conservation. There's some of our folks. This guy's a botany professor in Missouri, and the reason why he wanted to come on the trip so bad was he had his dream. Dr. Pyers, his dream for the trip wasn't to see the elephants or lions. His dream was to see the Welwitschia plant, which is a super, super unique plant that's endemic. That's just specifically native to the Namib Desert in this area. And it's very, very unique. It's just basically, it's just two leaves that grow out. And some people believe some of them can be 2,000 years old. And I guess any plant that can survive in these kind of desert conditions, you have to admire. So yeah, it's just two leaves that's two leaves that have grown, and then they start splitting off. It looks like a lot of leaves, but it's only two. So the Welwitschia plant. And when Dr. Pyers saw his first Welwitschia plant, he got super excited. So that was a pretty neat part of our trip. The other thing was one of the days that we were at this camp was one of the coolest adventures I've ever done in my life. And I've basically adventured all the time for my whole life. This one was unbelievable. We take two vehicles and we drive through this river valley looking for wildlife. We saw a bunch, and then into this lunar landscape. And that doesn't even look like the moon. I don't know what it looks like, but just some other planet of just sand dune sea. We drive across it for hours, just stunned by the landscape. It's fantastic. I mean, look at this. We drive up to the top of a sand dune, and you're just in the middle of a vast sandy ocean. Look at that. And so you see, this is a different kind of sand as we had down in the Namib Desert. It's not so much iron content in it, so it's not red. It's white. And then you drop down out of this dune sea, and just randomly there is a spring upwelling, and there's just this water source that's been there forever. It's full of water birds. And it's just like, you haven't seen water on the whole trip since you arrived in Windhoek, other than it came out of the sink or whatever. And then all of a sudden, here's this pond just flourishing with birds. Um, and one of the cool side stories that we learn about is that Dr. Stander has watched the lions when they kind of ran out and when they ran short of food. They went down into these grasses and they started specializing in hunting the water birds. Like they fed on geese and plovers and different stuff like that. You know? So just a super unique, kind of unexpected. That's what this trip is about, is just all these unexpected things. After we left that little oasis, we drove a little further and we came to the Skeleton Coast. And I've always been infatuated with the Skeleton Coast, maybe just because of the name. So I camped out 20 years ago a lot on the Skeleton Coast. Just this extremely unique. It's so harsh and raw. It's beautiful. And it's called the Skeleton Coast because they used to have a lot of whaling. It was done in sealing, and so there was lots of marine mammal bones. That's one kind of theory of how it got called that. But I mean, the Portuguese explorers, they called it the gates of hell. Because what it is it's a place that never rains, and so there's a lot of fog, which can support some stuff, but there's zero rain, and this very, very strong currents come up. So the ocean is like huge seas and swells, breaking waves, but there's also great fishing for commercial fishing. So people so much over the years, many years, have been tempted to fish in this area, but it's just like it's incredibly dangerous with rocks and reefs and islands, especially before they were charted properly, and just been one of the most notorious bodies of water in the world, this zone here. So what happens is you have a shipwreck, you come ashore, there's no water, so there's estimated to be around 1,000 shipwrecks on this coast, and there's 2 skulls of the Cape fur seals that I'll talk about in a sec too. So just ethereal, eerie, dramatic place that most people don't even know exists, but it has a flavor of its own that it's just stunning to see this. And some places in the beach, they're basically the sand is ground up agates just from natural wave action and stuff. But it's garnets, and garnet, yeah. So it almost looks kind of from a distance like there's blood on the beach, dried blood. So I know this is it's a bit dark, but I mean I love places in the world that are dramatic, and this one definitely is one of those. So the Skeleton Coast is something to see. And you drive down the beach a little bit, all of a sudden, boom, there's 100,000 Cape fur seals on the rocks, and it's because of this upwelling. This is similar to the one in South America. This Benguela current comes up, and it's an upwelling, which is extremely productive for fish from this water that's coming up. So it's a very, very, very productive seafood area. So the seals like that. Now, basically, when we leave the lodge, we haven't seen another vehicle, another person, basically any sign of humans other than this track in the sand the whole day. Like there's basically nothing there. So it's like super intense kind of wilderness experience. And then look at this giant waves just pounding. Of course, what do you do? We even though there's nothing out there, we still give a amazing gourmet breakfast. It's kind of all set up for us on the beach, and so we just sit out there. In the morning, it's always really foggy, and then this kind of day breeze blows in, and then you just get this really, really pleasant kind of temperature, and you're sitting there on this desolate beach, beautiful beach, having a delicious meal. So yeah, we're just everybody on the trip, including myself, was like that day was one of the coolest days of our lives. It was fantastic. So here's another little side story. So I've always, I get fixated. I love all wildlife, but I get fixated on certain things. And the brown hyena for me had been one that I'd always wanted to see. I just, for some reason, was really fascinated by this. It's not a spotted hyena like normally in Africa. It's a brown hyena. And that was one of the only places because they're critically endangered. that you can see him was on the Skeleton Coast. Well, I 20 years ago, my little sister had Christmas break her freshman year in college, and I somehow convinced my parents to allow her to come down, meet me in Namibia. We rented a car for a while, and then we drove around, and I took her to the Skeleton Coast, and I really wanted to see brown hyena. So I slept in the car. We slept in the car together. Um, and the only way to see brown hyenas would be at night. And this is how dedicated I sometimes can get to trying to see an animal. I took a dead fur seal um, that I found. I mean, there's dead carcasses everywhere, and saw a lot of hyena tracks, and figured, well, maybe one will come down. So I tied dental floss to my finger and had it out, and so that when I felt the tug in the middle of the night, I could flip the headlights on and I could see my brown hyena. Well, we never saw it. We ran the battery out, so we were kind of stuck there until we had to get rescued. But never did get to see the brown hyena. So it's one of my sister's favorite stories about being my brother. It wasn't really funny at the time, but I told Abner when we started the trip, man, if you can show me a brown hyena, I will never be able to pay you back enough. And on the Skeleton Coast, we drove in, and Abner just looks over and says, brown hyena. So we're right on the coast there, and I got to see this really cool creature. Well, creature you guys probably never heard of. Takes me to my next conservation story. Conservation hero, MC Verway, used to be the camp manager at this Wanna Skeleton Coast camp that we go to. She was a camp manager. She managed logistics, and she fell in love with brown hyenas. And so she started the first project, or what I think one of the first major project. I'm pretty sure it's the first one. I think there was maybe another one in the Kalahari, but to start studying the brown hyena, especially in this region, had never been studied. Everybody knew they were so endangered because they're just readily killed by poison. When you poison like ranchers and stuff, they just assumed, they just put poison out and just killed all the stuff that would kill their livestock. So that habitat loss, and they get bullied really bad by lions, and also spotted hyenas if they're there. And people don't really care about them because it's just, in their opinion, they're just a hyena. And the Lion King movie really kind of got everybody down on hyenas anyway. So it's not like an orangutan or an elephant. Like, nobody really cares. Well, this woman cares, and so basically she's collared the hyenas, got them habituated to her, and she's just finding out exactly, like, how do these guys live here in this desert? And so you can never conserve an animal if you don't know about it. So she's getting that groundbreaking research, and also being the hero of the brown hyena, and just getting very excited about it. She has a website, and her base is also stationed at the camp, the Wanap camp. So I just had her do a talk to her group about brown hyenas, and see her get so excited about this animal. Like, this is what the world needs, are more conservation people like this. Is people to be just pretty much dedicate their life to the elephants, the lions, the brown hyenas, to keep these wild places wild. So I think it's awesome. So yeah, kudos goes out to the MC. There's our camp, by the way. Again, like you're on another planet, a Star Wars planet that is a desert, but the tents and everything is super luxurious. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful rooms, super clean. Just like it's normal, your typical 5-star luxury camps of Africa, which really it's hard to match them anywhere in the world. So they just, it's just this luxury, even though you are one of the most desolate places in the world. Yeah. So then we go to our next stop. So this itinerary is a photo trip, and so we go to the 3 places: the Swakopmund, or I'm sorry, Sossusvlei, and then the Skeleton Coast, and then we go up to Etosha. And here's my mouse. You can see it circling there. This is the Etosha Pan. It is basically like a dried up lake that gets some water sometimes of the year, but it's this giant salt pan because it was a lake that used to have rivers that came into it and with no exits. So just like the Great Salt Lake of Utah, those salts build up eventually and becomes a salt pan. It's actually dried up, used to be a salt lake, now it's just a pan. So Etosha National Park is there. So it's a fantastic national park of wildlife. It's one of Africa's treasures. Well, where we go, this isn't the best picture, but I'm just showing kind of where we go is Ungava Lodge, which is a private game reserve concession just next to Etosha. And so that's where I'm going to go to my next conservation story, success story. So rhinos, both black and white rhinos have taken a tremendous hit over the years at the hands of humans. But just, I'll just get it. First of all, this is a white rhino. It's not because it's the color white. You notice the mouth is really, see down here, it's really wide. It's a grazer. It grazes on grass. That's what it's specialized in. Well, the Afrikaner word for white was white, wide, or something like that. And that just basically sounded like, even though they were trying to say it's the wide-mouthed rhino, but it just ended up getting into white rhino. But white rhinos are doing a lot better than the next one we'll talk about. There's about 17,000 white rhinos out there in the wild. So they are near threatened. Just starting out in the like 1960s, there was probably, well, yeah, the rhinos have really suffered because of habitat loss and they just uncontrolled hunting up until recently. And at least one of the great conservation success stories of these rhinos was that their numbers really began to recover. But more recently, the pressure from poaching to feed the Chinese traditional medicine market, well, I wouldn't say just Chinese, it's Asian traditional medicine market, has been brutal. So there's probably 5 or 6 rhinos maybe per day that are poached, and it's almost unstoppable. Why? Like, what is it about rhinos? So it's interesting. The rhino horn is only keratin. It's only like fingernail. But in this traditional medicine belief, they believe that since a rhino, when it copulates, can copulate for up to an hour, that the rhino horn must be a great aphrodisiac. It's not. It's ridiculous. But nobody's affiliated with that market seems to get the point. And so that's the root of the problem. But to be able to see these rhinos, and so the fantastic thing I love about these rhino pictures, if you guys will notice, why are they different than your average rhino picture? Look at how giant the horns are. So that's the point of the conservation story, is that these guys at Ungava concession, that is basically funded through several game lodges, and like Ungava Lodge that we go to and we support when we go there. They use those funds to, they have a basically anti-poaching unit and a way of protecting the rhinos that basically nobody in Africa has been able to get yet. So while just in the national park, they've had like in the last several years, I mean, hundreds of rhinos. I wrote, I won't get into too many details, but I did just write an article on rhino conservation on my blog. It's got a lot of those details, but I'm kind of running out of time. Basically, the point is that the Ungava Lodge is just fantastic. And so other places where they're losing the rhinos, the way that they're trying to stem that demand is they will immobilize a rhino and cut the horn off. Well, at Ungava, they don't even need to do that. And they basically, even though maybe it's hard to know the numbers, but 25 or 30, I even heard some other numbers that were higher, but I'll just go with that. Rhinos were killed in Etosha last year, just next door. 0 were killed in Ungava. So nice job, guys. And then the white rhino it needs a lot of grass, and so during this tremendous drought, they are provided with some supplemental food just to make sure that these very rare animals that are very special, kind of a source gene pool for reintroductions in other places, if the poaching can ever get controlled, can be protected. So, and then we've got the black rhino. The black rhino is much less numbers in the wild. I mean, in the 60s, there used to be 100,000 of them. Now there's like 5,000. That's come back from a tremendous conservation effort where the number actually reached as low as 2,500. So there's entities like the WWF is huge with rhino conservation, trying to help stem the poaching by training anti-poaching units, support traffic, which is basically like a wildlife trade Interpol, like a police force sort of, but it's all kind of NGO stuff. And studying the rhinos and just helping support their conservation. So WWF has done great. There's something called the Rhino Trust that's the subsidiary. Well, it does similar things in Namibia. And so there's a few places that, need to be celebrated. And so you can see these black rhinos with these tremendous, awesome, amazing horns that you don't see other places in Africa. So thank you, Ngava. The reason they're called black rhinos, is because it's the opposite of a white rhino. They don't have the wide mouth that the white rhino has. The other name for these guys is the hook-lipped rhino. So they've got a really narrow mouth here, and basically that is better for browsing on bushes, basically. But this is the water hole right out of Ngaba. So we're watching these guys at night. I mean, it's very, very dark. You can see, but you can't really take pictures. But just fantastic to be able to see black rhinos in the wild like this. And yeah, this is just next door in Etosha. We went for a day trip over there. And this is a black rhino. You can see it's a really good example of the hook-lipped, and so it can browse on the vegetation better with that shaped mouth. But also you notice that they had their horns cut off. Now this is growing back. It takes a long time, but if it grows back, then the poachers will want to get it even more. The sad thing is that when they cut the horns off these guys, the mothers can't defend their babies. And also lions have just recently learned how to prey on adult rhinos, even adults, if they don't have a horn. So you're starting to get predation of rhinos that never used to happen by lions because they're having to cut the horns off in order to save the rhinos. So anyway, yeah, I mean, there's not really a lot you can say. You just support the things that you can support, like Rhino Trust, WWF, Ngava Lodge, and you can. That's what it takes really. Ngava also has a lot of other amazing animals. So the lions, there's the lions coming down into the water hole at night, and it was mating season. Well, this female was an estrus. You can see he takes a sniff of her butt, and then he does this snarling. He's not roaring at her. He's not actually being menacing. What he's doing is called a flamen response, and he's passing that the smell through an additional olfactory organ in the top of their mouth to get more information out of it. So he's basically like, yep, she's definitely an estrus, and he likes that smell. Lions, of course, I mean, everybody loves lions, and how iconic are they to Africa and really just animals of the world. I mean, it's a lion. Lions are facing tremendous pressure recently that maybe the news hasn't really gotten out yet, but there's a habitat loss, there's conflict with ranchers and stuff, but they're facing much, much greater poaching pressure now. And again, I just tell you the reality, the facts. Again, the Asian medicine market, they like rhino horn because the rhinos can mate so long. Well, they really like the parts of big cats because big cats can mate up to a couple of hundred times during a 5-day period. Like they basically, if you ever been and seen big cats mate, like I've seen leopards, mating doesn't take very long. It takes just like 10 seconds or something. But the female wants him to mate with her again and again and again and again and again, like every 10 minutes for several days. So if you look at that, you're like, wow, that's some pretty amazing stamina. So that myth has gone over towards making it an aphrodisiac. It's just so sad, but that's the reality of it. And tigers were, the traditional symbol of that in that medicine market. But because tigers are so difficult to get now, there's only a few thousand left. They're actually kind of like, well, lions will probably work too. So lions are easier to get. Lions are really easy to get poached because all you need to do is just put some poison bait out and come back later. It's not only the Asian market, there's also traditional medicines of Southern Africa that also involve lion parts. So point is, yeah, there's terrible news, but places like Ngava are kind of the shining stars of protecting these amazing animals. And if it wasn't for ecotourism, there would be no Angava Lodge. Just nobody can afford that. To have these kind of anti-poaching units and all these guides that are employed on the ground that love these lions as much as anybody in the world. It's their job, it's their livelihood. They have intimate knowledge, their eyes on the ground, and that's where all the protection happens. So these fantastic, Ungava lions. It's beautiful stuff. I'm going to ramp it up because my hour's almost up. But just a few pictures, more of Ungava. You're seeing some of the other iconic wildlife like the cheetah, kudu. I saw my first honey badger. Honey badger was the other animal with the brown hyena that I had been to Africa several times and never could get a sight of one. I actually sat up all night, many nights at campgrounds because there were supposedly honey badgers that would come in at night, the garbage cans or something, and I just sat awake all night. Never saw the honey badger, but I told Abner, if you can show me a honey badger, and he did. I saw 4 honey badgers on this trip. 4 honey badgers, the coolest animal in the world. I mean, the honey badger is so tough. It's basically indestructible. Lions, a pride of lions, can almost basically not even kill a honey badger. Leopards don't mess with them. They can get bit by the most poisonous snakes. They take a nap, they wake up. So they're just very, very famous as being the animal that doesn't care. Nothing phases them. So yeah, they're pretty incredible. In fact, I'll show a little video of honey badgers that came into the lodge at night to scavenge around on stuff. So that was, you want to talk about seeing somebody get excited? You should have been with me then. Wow. Found a bone and made me really happy. Other animals in Ungava that just run around the lodge are banded mongoose. No fear of people because it's Ungava. They love the animals. Animals don't have to worry about people. And so you can get incredible views of mongoose these guys live in a group unit. Other mongooses in the world are actually solitary, but these guys just go along in a group, and they're super, super cute. They have a lot of personality. The banded mongoose, here's just a random bird. It's a red-eyed bulbul. It's beautiful around the lodge. And then, I couldn't believe it, was around the lodge. Also, there's a big family of rock hyrax that just come in. They'll come in and sit in the restaurant just because the floor there is cooler. So you just have these super cool rock hyraxes, which, if you don't know what these are, why they're so amazing, this is actually the closest genetic relative to the elephant. That's weird. But I'd always wanted to see one, never had, didn't know where I had to go to see it, but I got to basically just hang out with mongooses and rock hyraxes when we weren't on game drives. And then after dinner, we could look for scorpions and honey badgers. So this place is amazing. So this is, and yeah, here's another magic moment at Ungava. I don't even need to talk through it. Just wow. That'll get your heart going, won't it? Nothing is as humbling as a bull elephant. Even if you're in a vehicle, you're still just like, oh my god. So. You didn't take a single picture. No, I didn't either. I was just. Wow. And I just wanted to throw this out there. There's another program. This was a photo trip, but if you go on the regular trip, you go to Desert Rhino Camp, and it's also a possible extension. And Desert Rhino Camp is a similar private concession. It's that works to protect and save these desert adapted rhinos, and you can actually go on walking safaris to get on the ground with them. So that's another amazing aspect of going to Namibia when our world gets back to normal. Yeah, and that is my last slide. Is everybody still there?
We are. Yes, we are, Brad. That was fantastic. Do you have time to hang around for a few questions?
Of course.
Okay, cool. First, I wanted to say we have someone who traveled and met Abner and just absolutely loved him and just commented that he was such a fabulous guide. And somebody else who was there in March and said that they would just go out, they would go back in a heartbeat, that it's definitely a bucket list trip. So it's neat to hear that feedback from folks who've been. Um, we have a couple people asking about the best time to travel and a little bit about climate and average temperatures.
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah. So like in the fall is when I went, and it was basically, um, it got hot during the day. Um, some of the days were well over 100, but those are the times where we would just basically rest and relax. Of course, it's a dry heat, and there's sort of watering holes, and there's a lot of wind there, so that over 100 didn't really feel so bad. Um, so that and then the rains began to come. It's kind of seemed to cool things off a little bit. But yeah, no, it's definitely hot there, and it can be a little bit chilly at night since it's the desert. During the other times of the year, in like in Etosha, it actually can get to freezing because you're at 4,000, 5,000 feet. So, but just like with any NatHab trip, we always schedule our trips based upon the best time of year. And so, yeah.
Hmm. Tell me about a little bit about packing. How does one pack and prepare for this trip?
Um, yeah. So the one thing is that there's a extreme weight limitations that the NatHab office will talk you through before you go. You don't really need to take that much stuff. I mean, they'll actually do their laundry for you at the lodges. They don't have to really have big, heavy clothes. It's nice to have a jacket in case it's cool when you're, at night or something and windy. But it's amazing how little that you need and to bring, and it's mostly just protecting yourself from the sun and packing light for the
Mhm.
airplanes. Um,
Oh,
but I know when we've got like really really detailed resources that we always send our people about how to prepare. That's a pre-departure briefings and stuff.
hmm. Okay.
Is that Did that answer
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
question?
that's good. Yep. Thank you. Photography. We always have a lot of folks who are interested in being able to take the, best photos they can to document their trip. What lens would you recommend one
Yeah.
take?
Well, I did pretty well with my 400, 100 to 400. Is what I took all the pictures from the webinar with. Um, Videoing with my iPhone because it's cool, and then definitely the like a wide angle, 16 to 35 for the landscapes that you saw in the beginning of the trip. So the first part of the trip like focuses pretty heavily on landscape stuff, and then it goes into mostly wildlife. But those landscapes are gorgeous everywhere we go. But
Mm,
yeah, definitely landscape.
okay.
You might want to also think about bringing a tripod for some night photography. Um, I didn't include any of those, but it can be really good for stars.
Hmm. Cool. Okay. All right. Well, I'll stop there. We've got a lot of other questions that we will get our team to look over after the webinar, but keeping us on schedule here, I just want to say we had this other nice comment and then I'll turn it back to you. We have someone who wrote, Brad's excitement about this area is contagious. He makes it sound like an experience not to be missed. So, Brad, thank you for taking us on this virtual journey today. It was exceptional and it was just so fun to be able to connect. So let me turn it back to you for closing comments.
Okay. I just so lucky that I got to see Namibia this way and see it with Abner and see it with a super cool group of people. We all got to be great friends. But really, the thing that and I was mentioning in the beginning, as I was thinking about it, is like as I was making this presentation or thinking about what I was going to say, is just like I almost teared up a bunch because it is so, it was such a powerful experience to directly be able to um, see the Dr. Brown and learn about Dr. Stander, the lion biologist, and um, hear about MC's love of the brown hyena. So like that's what I really came away with is this trip, for as far as conservation goes, like you leave there, you know that you have helped And you also sometimes I think like imagine, and this is something to think about now. Like imagine if no more tourists came to Namibia, or if there weren't any, like what would happen? And it just reminds you that this is it's a great way to learn about and respect nature. And this is a great example. And it's just kind of like that forgotten corner of Africa that people don't think about so much. Um, that is so incredible. I just really wanted to kind of share in whatever way I could how awesome it is. I guess that's it. Hang in
Okay.
there, guys, and remember what Ben Bressler told us on his email. He said, nature is, and I feel better right now than I have in a week because I'm all I'm thinking about is how cool Namibia is. So nature could be the thing that keeps everybody sane. Because we will get through this stuff, and it's going to be just another thing in the past. But it's luckily that we still have, nature to kind of ground ourselves.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you so much, Brad. So, everybody take a moment out, go outside today, listen to some birds, put your feet in your grass if you can, and look for the replay from us. We're going to send that out to all of you in an email, and look for more webinars. So, we're looking forward to being able to share more info with you, more nature. So, with that, we will say good day and conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.